nobody thinks that it will benefit America to become more like Haiti. Nobody thinks that. Or I would challenge anyone, if they do think that, to explain how that's the case. Like, in what way could this country be improved by making it more like Haiti? When you look at Haiti, what part of Haiti are you saying to yourself, we need more of that?
Beaches.
Well, we have more beaches than them too, right? Don't we?
Right.
We're a much bigger country.
Right. We don't want a marine invasion and occupation of the United States that constantly decapitates governments and takes the money out of the country and saddles us with
We don't want the Clintons
debt
either.
from a revolution. Yeah.
Right. Although I don't. So you're saying that
we wouldn't want to be like basically a colony that the entire West spends 200 years punishing after the Haitian Revolution.
I get that. I understand that, but also at a certain
we
point,
wouldn't want that. No. Yes.
we wouldn't want that. But I would also say that that's not entirely why Haiti's in the position that it's in. I mean, at a certain point, as a country, you have to stand on your own 2 feet and take care of yourself. And
but at what point is that? They elect Aristide and we overthrow Aristide. Then they elect Jovenel Moïse. Jovenel Moïse has assassinated a bunch of people with American connections, and then we install in 2021, like the United States installed the prime minister that we just ousted. Like, so we could say, okay, yeah, you got to get over the 200 years ago, but like we're still doing it.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not in favor of. I'm very non-interventionist in my policies, so I'm not in favor of most of the things that we're doing in other countries.
We just made the new government in Haiti in a hotel room in Jamaica, and then we insisted that whatever government we made in Jamaica had to allow Kenyan troops to come in under the flag of the UN in order to go to war with the gangs.
Yeah, I'm not. Look, I'm not interested in.
Right.
If it were up to me, I'm not interested in doing anything in Haiti. Like let Haiti be Haiti and take care of them. That's sort of my whole point here. Let them take care of themselves and their own problems. I'm also not saying that there's like never a scenario where we would let someone from Haiti into the country. But it doesn't have to just be about Haiti. But when you're throwing open the gates and just inviting anyone, in particular, the third world.
I guess your assumption there was that it is Haitian people that are creating the conditions on Haiti, and that if the Haitian people come to Springfield, they will recreate the conditions
but I don't
that
think
are
you
Haiti in Springfield, whereas what I'm saying is that it's actually the U.S. that has
I don't think you can entirely put it on
largely.
That's right.
I'm glad to know that you guys are against the death penalty. I just want to say that. You're so pro-life, so you're against the death penalty.
I'm against the death penalty.
I love the death penalty.
I'm not going
So you're not pro-life.
I'm with blessed.
So you're not pro-life. So you're not pro-life.
I love the death.
So you're not pro-life.
No, I'm pro-life.
No, but he
I think
did it.
I think the
He just did it. He didn't catch it.
okay, I'm going to put Charlie.
Good on you
here.
for being principled.
Hold on, I'm going to get Charlie.
I'm pro-life, and I'm also pro-due process, which unfortunately one political party in this country has abandoned.
So then you're against Guantanamo Bay. So then you're against Guantanamo Bay.
But let's just cut through the talking points, because
if you're for due process, you're against Gitmo.
Guys.
If you're for due process, you're against Guantanamo Bay.
No, I'm for due process for American citizens. I'm not for due process for terrorists who fight in violation of the Geneva
All right, guys, I'm going to step in here.
undermining the Geneva Convention protections themselves.
I'm going to step in here.
This is going to be easy if he keeps walking right into the trap like that.
So, Charlie, I didn't want. Were you going to say?
No, I'm enjoying being the calm one on this.
Okay. Yeah.
Why do you want your own house?
So I could just be financially dependent, pick where I want to live.
Even if you're married?
Yeah, like I would probably buy a house before pursuing dating for marriage, yeah.
So what if, and then he would have his own house and you'd...
I guess from there we would figure it out. From there, if we wanted to sell the house or both live in the house, like I'd be fine moving a guy into my house, yeah.
And you would still own the house? Or you'd split the house with him? Or you'd transfer it to him?
I wouldn't transfer it to him. It would be my house for sure.
You would have separate finances?
I don't know about that, but in terms of like where I want to live, I'm 100% picking that on my own and getting my own house.
Okay, but
so if the man comes and
goes,
so
your bank accounts would go together, but you'd keep the house in your name.
If we're married, I guess we'd figure it out as we go. But I'd probably like date someone, and then I don't know. I just don't want to be dependent. I don't want to like.
You don't want to be dependent. So right, exactly. You don't want to be dependent. So why get married?
Why get married?
Yeah, I could be independent. I could live on my own. I could hire a maid. I could hire a cook. I could just whatever, I don't want to be independent. I want to be dependent on my wife. I love my wife. I want to make a vow that I'm going to stay with my wife forever and have a nice big family. And I don't want to be separated at all. I want to be one flesh with my wife. if I didn't want to do that, if I wanted to just be on my own but have someone to mitigate the loneliness and occasionally sleep with, why get married at all?
I do want to get married. I am going to eventually date to marry, I think. Like, my goal is to eventually start dating in like a year, date in under 3 months, get engaged, get married. I don't want to do the like multi-year dating and like cohabitating before. I think that's a joke. I think it's a waste of time.
But
I'm also,
why do it?
I'm also cognizant of the fact that men today are a joke, and there's a 1 in 4 chance that your husband's going to commit infidelity, and I don't believe in necessarily like pursuing
There are things you can do to
marriage if
mitigate
they
those
cheat on
stats,
you.
though.
Mitigating infidelity on my husband's part? What? Being a fucking blow doll for him?
No, I wouldn't recommend that either. No, the things you could do is marry men who, for instance, don't recognize the sacramental reality of divorce. Just to use one example.
That's not what I said. I said infidelity.
Or who recognize that infidelity is
every man
great
I've ever
moral sin.
dated has been Christian conservative, and at least one of them I found an Oculus in his closet where he's watching VR porn. In my experience, like I said, at the macro level, it's usually these Christian conservatives who are the most porn addicted, and at a micro level, these men I'm dating.
You date a lot of these Christian conservatives.
Well,
There's something about them that attracts you.
Well, I'm waiting till marriage.
Good. Oh, good. So you don't. Okay. Well, look, I think that's fabulous, and I love that you, as a feminist, are very attracted to Christian conservative men. I think that's good for society broadly. It's bad that these guys are like looking at porn or whatever. I don't know that necessarily implies that once they get married, they would either continue to do that or would step out on you and cheat and have an affair or whatever. It does seem to me, though, that certain groups of men are less likely than others to sleep with other women, and so. You know, if you want to have that good, stable life and maybe overcome your fears of being dependent on someone who might be a total loser, then you might want to make sure you don't pick a total loser.
But even stepping out aside, I mean, I gave you those stats about correlation between religious men and pornography consumption and prostitution purchasing. So, like, how can you say that?
Some people who are broadly religious of some sect or other do that, and all people are tempted by things. But I don't think that we can just throw our hands in the air and fall into a kind of romantic quietism and say, well, they're all just these men are all dogs, they're all cads. No, actually, some men are more inclined to virtue than others, and you know that might, if you.
But based off the stats, it would seem the religious men are less inclined to virtue.
No,
if they're
not
watching porn and buying sex.
That's ridiculous. You're telling me that
but I gave you
Christian men are more like no. You gave me a stat and said, you know, certain red states with certain religious groups consume certain kinds of porn or whatever. But
the more Christians are in a state, the more pornography consumption and searches there are in prostitution purchases. Yes.
It would seem that perhaps there are other factors at play there when you're talking about a full state. I don't know. So let's narrow it down. Let's find a piece of the system that we can point to and say, well, this is designed to hurt black people.
When you see stats that say like a black homeowner who's trying to get a mortgage, who has a higher credit score and higher income, gets a higher interest rate from the average bank than a white applicant. A bunch of these studies have been done where they'll put in like a black sounding name and higher credit scores, higher income, better candidates on paper other than their name, and they get overall, there have been so many studies that have replicated this. They get a higher interest rate, which means their cost of borrowing is higher, means the mortgage is higher, which means you have to have that much more money to move into the neighborhood that you're talking about. So systemically, it doesn't say, well, if you're black, you can't live here, but systemically what it does is it makes it easier for white people to move into these wealthier neighborhoods, harder for black people to move into those neighborhoods. And that's before you even get to the wealth effect. Jim Crow, only ended recently, which means that if you look at the kind of savings rates and the inheritance rates for the average black family, it's close to nil, especially after the subprime mortgage wipeout of 2008, compared to white families, which can go to mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and say, can you help put my kids in private school? Can you pay the down payment? 20% is an awful lot for this mortgage.
Generational wealth.
Yeah.
Right.
So you combine the fact that they have to pay higher interest rates with the fact that there's lack of generational wealth. That to me is systemic. But I'm curious specifically on the interest rate question. What's going on there? And should that be a problem that we as a democratic society should address? Like, why are black loan applicants paying higher mortgage interest rates across the board? And that is replicated across the economy.
Okay, I'd have to look at the studies you're talking about. You say that they've been replicated time and time again. There's no issues with the studies, and there's no issues methodology.
I'm sure people could pick some of the studies apart, but it's pretty well accepted.
Yeah, I'd have to know who is accepted by exactly. But so for the sake of argument, let's say that those studies are totally legit. I would still go back to a class issue on that. And the reason is that, look, banks...
But the white...
Well, can we explain? Okay. Like, banks care about the money. That's all they care about. They don't care about... I mean, these banks are not being run by people who are saying, we got to keep black people poor. I don't care about that. I don't think they care about anybody. They care about the money. And so if that's happening, they're making stereotypical assumptions, class-based assumptions that I believe they would probably also make if somehow they got they had the impression that this was, say, a white, quote unquote, white trash, as they're often called, from the trailer park. If I think the banks would have the same sort of skeptical, discriminatory attitude in that case as they would to someone who they're assuming is from the inner city, let's say.
Right, but so the other word for that would be implicit bias. So let's say the banks...
We have to wrap, by the way. We have a hard note.
Oh, but let's say we got to wrap in a second. But let's say the banks only do care about money. That's a reasonable thing to say. So then what could explain why they would treat the two differently? It would have to be, like you're saying, but what you're saying is there might be some implicit bias toward, if they could identify some poor white guy, which goes to the point, though, of how it's easier for poor whites, which I used to be one of, but it was easier for me to migrate out. My name is just Ryan Graham.
I don't even think
you can't even tell that I was white trash.
Right.
I mean, you can if you know me pretty well, but but you can't tell on a resume or an application.
You see his
to a
arrest
bank.
record.
Yes.
I don't know. You're wearing a tie and everything. I wouldn't say. I mean,
there you go.
You could have fooled me.
Yeah.
Look, but I wouldn't even call it implicit bias. I think it's just like banks. They are biased against people they don't think will pay their mortgage, basically.
Right. And so why don't they think a person with a black name will pay their mortgage?
Because I think in that case,
despite a high credit score and a high income.
If that is true, then they're making assumptions they're making class-based assumptions. This is a lower income person coming from a low income neighborhood, even if their current income is, the same as, that's the background. And so
sounds like those people face a systemic problem.
Gotta go.
Well, so when you say against their will, what you're referring to cases of rape, basically, right?
No,
because when you engage in sex, you are engaging in an act of the will, the consequence of which is, historically speaking, always pregnancy.
Correct, but when you consent to sex, you're not consenting to pregnancy. You are consenting to the possibility of pregnancy. But you can think of it like this. You understand the difference between consensual sex and sexual assault. You should then understand the difference between wanted pregnancy and unwanted pregnancy. Technically, physically, they are the same thing. But when your body is being used against your will and without your consent, those are very different experiences for the person.
But Bronte, you've just acknowledged that when you consent to sex, you are consenting to the possibility of pregnancy. So there you have it. There you are. You have consented to that. Now, you might not want to become pregnant. You might want to use all sorts of contraceptives and things like that. But surely, I mean, you've just said it yourself. You are consenting to that possibility. And so now you're telling me that if one wants to then withdraw one's consent because one doesn't want to be uncomfortable for some matter of months, you're saying that the better alternative is to just kill the baby whom you have acknowledged is alive?
First of all, calling pregnancy simply discomfort is belittling the experience. But you can also think
it's
like
beautiful
this.
and miraculous too, but it's also uncomfortable.
Says the white man who will never experience it.
But
you can think of it. No, so
I thought that can men become pregnant or no?
If you have a uterus.
A man with a uterus can.
Michael.
So
if you don't have a uterus, then you're not the men with a.
Well, look, I'm not a biologist, so I'm not sure if I'll become pregnant. I do have a little emoji that tells me that these days men can become pregnant. Regardless of that, if you're talking about non-consensual sex, what percentage of pregnancies arise from rape, incest, or involve a threat to the life of the mother?
Well, it's hard to say because about 3/4 of sexual assault go unreported. So any statistic that I would give to you is going to be inherently inaccurate.
I'll give you a statistic from the most left-wing source I can give, the Guttmacher Institute. It's the think tank for Planned Parenthood. Less than 1% of abortions take place because of rape, incest, or pose a threat to the life of the mother. So we're talking about an extraordinarily small number.
According to the ones that have been reported. According to the ones that have been reported.
Don't you think if there were a scarier statistic that the most pro-abortion organization in the country might use those statistics?
But these statistics are very difficult to collect because, again, sexual assault is a difficult issue when people don't often report them, because you see how our political system doesn't often support victims of sexual assault. And so our system doesn't support people reporting sexual assault. Therefore, it is underreported.
So this seems difficult for me, Bronte. Well, one, it seems that in the years after the Me Too movement.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. I found it interesting. One of our people testified today that they had their gender affirming surgery at 16. And I know you in former comments mentioned this on your blog. At about 16, you're an adult who is mature and can make decisions. You're that at 16. I don't care what anybody says, even going so far as to say, 16 people, when you're 16, you should be married and could be pregnant or should be pregnant. So I'm curious if 16 is an adult in your view. Why does this bill have the minor defined as 18?
Mr. Walsh, recognized. Yeah, that's a hit piece you took from Media Matters, from something when I was a radio host 13, 14 years ago, in my early 20s. It's also not an accurate reflection of what I actually said. I was talking about the fact that people tended to marry young historically, and that's all that was about.
Ever since the beginning of time, teenage girls have been getting pregnant. It used to be more common. The peak, ever since they started keeping records of these things, which they only started doing recently, like in the 20th century, but ever since they started keeping records, in 1957 was the peak for teenage pregnancy. 1957. Not 2009,
well, back
not
then,
today.
All of them were supposed to have kids. Like, that's when you had kids.
That's my point, okay? So what I'm saying is that the problem is not per se teenage pregnancy. It's unwed pregnancy. That's the problem in society.
In fact, there is the ultimate well-being for a human being is to live in the truth with a deep recognition of truth. And that's how you...
I mean, this isn't a new thing. I mean, we do this already. There's so many stories of people who have been changed by, by God. They've seen the light of God. And so we sort of turn a blind eye to science, right? We're going to innate science because it's for our benefit.
We're gonna let someone else ask a few questions.
Sounds like they're kind of scared of the answer.
Okay.
But I just want to make clear that you
I can't hear.
told me to leave as soon as I brought up a point that you didn't want to respond to. So.
I couldn't hear what you say your last comment.
I was just saying I want to point out that you asked me to leave as soon as I brought up something you didn't want to respond to. So.
What did I want to respond to?
I will freely leave. Absolutely. I mentioned religion being a source of where we deny or look past science for the greater sense of humanity. And you asked me to leave.
I did respond to that. Okay. I responded to that quite directly. So
I'm sorry I can't hear you.
All right. Thank you for your question.
Next question. So, I still can't hear you.
I can't hear you. You got to speak up. All right. Thank you for your question.